the way people deal with disappointments are going to essentially determine their future, right?
Right.
And he would say, like, disappointments are constant, disappointments are certain, but disappointments can be conquered.
If you believe we can change the narrative, if you believe we can change our communities, if you believe we can change the outcomes, then we can change the world. I'm Rob Richardson. Welcome to Disruption Now. Welcome to Disruption Now. I'm your host and moderator, Rob Richardson. It's an honor here to be on with Sevetri Wilson, who is an entrepreneur. She's pretty much been an entrepreneur since she got out of college. She knew what she wanted to do. She went right to it. And so she definitely fits the profile of what we like to have here on Disruption. She doesn't fit into the narrative. She disrupts the narrative. And we're honored to have her on. So she's started Resilia, which is a company that used to be ExemptMeNow. I believe that was the name. And she saw early on there was an opportunity to scale it, to make it so the services she was offering, she could help to really help nonprofits scale, help them enterprise. And she's raised, they think, over $3 million, one of only 11 Black women to do so. I believe the only one in New Orleans to do so. I've actually had at least one of those other Black women on, Dawn Dixon. So
yeah, Dawn, yes. Out of Ohio.
Yeah, so of course, I'm out of Cincinnati. And so she's doing some amazing things that you're going to learn about. We're going to talk about her journey. We're going to talk about how the bumps along the road and how she's still growing. I'm sure it's not a linear path, and we're just excited to have her on. I got a chance to actually learn about her through can't remember which magazine it was, but it was talking about Black women who have become millionaires and how they did it. So, Sevetri, we're just honored to have you on. How you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing well. I forgot to mention that she is a member of the wonderful, lovely ladies of Alpha Kappa Alpha. We love that case. Yeah, I don't know how I forgot that, but I just did. But I made sure to put it in, Sevetri, so you don't have to get mad at me.
Thanks. I appreciate that.
How's it going for you in this COVID craziness world? How's this adjustment been, just getting used to business in this environment? What's that been like?
Oh, man, it's been a challenge for sure. I think it's been a challenge for everyone. So sometimes I feel like when I talk about it, I'm preaching to the choir. I think that people have had different challenges based on what you're doing, but we definitely did what everyone else did, right? Shut down the office, went home. Our team is still working from home, both in our New York and New Orleans office. And although the office is open, so they can go in and out. And so we do have some team members who are going in and out. But, when COVID began to creep up, for New Orleans, it was in March. We essentially were in the process of raising a Series A round.
Oh, wow.
So you can imagine that, right?
The timing's so great, right? Yeah. What great time.
And I remember the onset of COVID coming, and I'm telling my attorney, look, we need to go ahead and get this round closed. And we were able to successfully get it closed. And so we raised another $8 million for the company in March.
Congratulations. Awesome.
And so, and we were fortunate, right? Because it actually put us in a good financial cash position to continue to grow the company during COVID. And so we've added a little over 15 employees since March happened. And so it's really been a whole nother test to try to literally build a plane while you're flying, right? And so a whole nother layer to that.
Yeah, build the plane while you're flying, while there's a whole bunch of weather you didn't expect while you're flying the plane. So
yes, I mean, across the board, from the pandemic to Black Lives Matter movement and murder of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, to unprecedented hurricanes here in the Gulf.
Oh, I forgot you're in the Gulf. Yeah.
It's been a crazy, crazy year. And the election, it's a lot. It's a lot.
This is the craziest ass election we've seen in our lifetime. I know people talk about craziness in the election and politics, but this is a whole new level of crazy that we need to change very quickly. Yeah, that I tell folks, and this is not an equivalent. I saw on your Twitter that you talked about, Kanye running for president. And I actually love Kanye too, but he's just been...
Man, Kanye was my favorite artist. People don't understand.
Me too.
People don't understand how much I just after Katrina, I'm from New Orleans. So after Katrina, he was the one on stage.
I remember.
Don't care about Black. I was like, that's my boy. Man, I reminisce.
And then he went to the second place. I don't know what happened to the brother. I think he is a genius, and I don't know how we got here, but just very quickly on this, I think he is a genius, and I just think he just lost his way. And when you it just tells you that no matter what, no matter how talented you are, people need support. They need mental support. They need spiritual support. They need that. And when you don't have an anchor around you, and I do really fundamentally believe that his mother passing, it would have us, like, I'm really close to my mom, right? Like,
Yeah.
I can see and understand how that can be a life-changing event in your life. And if your foundation is not right, that can knock you off. I mean, you remember
Yeah,
he
I lost my mother at 21, right? And
wow.
people, and I tell people all the time that I feel that people who do lose their mother, or the person that's closest to them, the, as I say, like the person that I knew for sure 100% had my back no matter what, right? Is taken from you, that you generally go two ways, right? Either you spiral, which is what I think kind of happens, and kind of to your point, or you just like plow forward, right? And so I've
Yeah,
just seen like a combination of those based on people who I've known who were super close to their mothers and they lost them unexpectedly,
absolutely.
which is how I lost my mother. So
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that's, first of all, I'm sorry for your loss. It doesn't become, I would say you learn how to cope, but it's never easy. I actually lost my sister this year, and
sorry to hear that.
we lost her at the beginning of 2020, and it's hard for a lot of reasons, and also just to see the pain in my parents' eyes has been tough. But I can't imagine losing my mother that early. And this brings me to a good point of something I wanted to discuss with you, particularly how your upbringing may have influenced who you are right now. I didn't know the story of your mother, but I did do some research and found out the story of your father passing away. And someone was, I can't remember who the person was, his adopted sister, who I think was put in charge of his estate. And then she took all the money, if I remember right. And your
Yeah.
mother fought her and then lost a lot of money and went into debt fighting her. And since you talked about your mother, can you just talk about those experiences and how maybe it didn't play into, if it just played into your life personally, you can talk about that, fine. But if you see
Absolutely.
some way that it played into your journey in terms of making you
Get your
resilient or just
finances
learning.
together, 100%. And yeah, I mean, it's played definitely a personal and professional, just it's held a personal and professional place in my life. From a personal side, I felt that my father had did what he was supposed to do, right? As this male figure wanting to leave more for his family, right, than what was like left to him. He had built a successful company, and he unexpectedly passed away from a stroke, right? And so because he didn't have a lot of his ends like tied up when he passed away, that was able to happen, right? So my aunt basically oversaw all of his assets. And instead of doing what she was supposed to do, right, divvy it up between his kids, which I'm sure most people who pass away, unless they have some rift with their family and children, are building this legacy, building something so that their kids can have something, which I knew that
Right.
was the case with my father. And so I do feel fundamentally that I would be a different person, though, had I came into money, right? Had I not had essentially lived a very, very like modest first generation college student, going to college on full Pell Grant, scraping up money, mom not being able to afford this or afford that, working constantly to ensure that we had the things that we did have. That I don't think I would be like the entrepreneur I am today. I don't think I would be like
You don't
the
think you'd have the same drive?
no,
You don't think,
I don't. I don't think I would have. I think I would be probably just a lot more comfortable.
right,
And for me, with my parents passing away at a young age, it made me, as with anyone, very uncomfortable. And when they kind of tell you about like immigrants who come over to the U.S. and then they have these huge successes, so they found Google or they found
right,
this
right,
company or that company. I think it's the mindset that you just don't have anything, right? Like, and it's
right.
like you don't have anything. You look back, you can't go back. You can't build out of your parents' basement. These things that generally would comfort or be your safety net is no longer there. And I think that just definitely propelled me to work as hard as I work and desire things that I want and like to leave a legacy. As even maybe a substitute, right, for my parents not being there. and not having the ability to give it to them. So I had to give it to someone. I had to build something for, whether that's my team or whomever else. And so I definitely think that the loss of my father in that way, and
How
my
old were you when you
mother.
lost your father?
So I was 8
Oh,
when I
wow.
lost my father, and I was
Wow.
21 when my mother passed away.
Wow, that's incredible. I mean, it's as you talked about earlier when we talked about mental health. I think I think it is harder for people that don't have that, and less people, by the numbers just show, come out of those situations. But when you can come out of those situations, you come out stronger, you come out more determined, and certainly that's been the case for you. But take me back to when you were younger. Let's say 8. All right, around that age, that formative age, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
What did you want to be when you grew up, and what do you want to be now?
So then I wanted to be an attorney. Don't ask me why. I just felt like maybe the only person in the only person I knew who had something more was like an attorney, right?
Right.
But as I progressed in my teens, I actually did want to be more of like an entrepreneur. And just from like the little bit I did know from my older siblings about like my father, I kind of got like the entrepreneur bug pretty early on. I kind of think it does run through your DNA. So I feel
I
like
agree.
that's in my DNA.
Which is why I think you still would have been. I think you still would have done it. I think you underestimate yourself. I think you would have done it, and perhaps you would have been able to just start earlier and maybe learn different lessons. But we can't go back in life.
Yeah,
Doesn't
maybe I would have
exist.
took over my dad's company. I don't know.
Yeah, and then helped him and scale it. Like, I think it's in your. I think it's part of you, right? If you're in the right environment, it could be nurtured, and you had enough of it where it was nurtured, despite the challenges, right? It was still nurtured where you can see the possibilities. Your dad died, but you saw him do it. That does mean something when you see your dad do it, and maybe when you saw your mother fight. I mean, you don't want to be in that position, but it showed you to keep fighting through because your mother still. I mean, still made it through that, even though it was a hard time. You know.
Yeah, it kind of takes me something that my pastor um, said once, and he was like, the way people deal with disappointments are going to essentially determine their future, right?
Right.
And he would say, like, disappointments are constant, disappointments are certain, but disappointments can be conquered, right? And so I do feel like the way I've dealt with disappointments in life, and I'm definitely not a crowd with spilled milk, although people are definitely bigger than spilled milk, but I do feel like,
I'm
okay,
about to say
cry.
that's a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, but I'm a big person of like cry, get it out, figure out how you're going to deal with it, how you're going to grieve, whatever it is. It doesn't have to be a loss of a person. It could be a loss of something, your business, right? People
Sure.
are impacted significantly many different ways. It doesn't have to be necessarily like a loss, a death of someone. And my friends who experience like divorces, et cetera, that's also like a loss. And you have to like grieve whatever it is that you're losing. And so I think about that sentiment, right? And all these things are like disappointments, letdowns. But most importantly, it's like, oh, how do you grieve and how do you figure out like how do you move forward?
Right. So, a related point to that, can you think of a time, maybe in your business or professional life? I mean, you've had obviously personal loss and tragedy, but can you think about a time when you've had a failure or a setback, and how you see that now as a setup for a future opportunity that not going right or not going as you expected actually helped to form who you are as an entrepreneur?
Yeah, one of the most humbling things that I think anyone who has started one business and went out to do a second business that they've had to raise capital for, right? And
Yeah.
so for me,
Raising capital is a humbling process,
oh,
period.
it's so humbling.
Oh, it's so
Um,
humbling. I'll tell you about
man,
mine in a second. Go ahead.
and it's like, oh yeah, I want to hear that. It's like people are just like punching you in the gut, right? Over
All
and
the
over and
time.
over. And then I talk about like how, particularly for us Black founders, it's like they keep moving the finish line, and so you get them what they need, and they move the finish line farther. Like, it's always something, right? And so I think that the failures that I experienced in raising capital definitely made me an entrepreneur that I am in my tech company, and why I have purposely kept an office and remain in New Orleans. Because once I raised capital, I could have been like, Psh, I'm out, right? I'm out. I'm
Right.
going to go to another place where there's more tech founders, more of this, more of that. But I really felt that it was important to like build something where I was so that we can have not just me being the only Black female that raised X, Y, and Z capital in Louisiana. And so now I've raised more venture capital, not only of any Black female founder, but of any female founder ever.
Go ahead. We got to have the applause for that. That's awesome.
But, it's applause, but it's also sad.
It is sad. Actually, it is sad. Yeah, it's sad. But you are breaking the narrative because you're helping to change that, which I respect that you're staying in it's why I stayed in Ohio too. I respect that you're staying in the ecosystem and helping to build.
Yeah. And I think it took a lot of just like gut checks along the way, a lot of failures along the way for me to still want to do that. Right. And so I think that a lot of times we could look at it and we're like, okay, shoot, when I have the opportunity to leave, I'm leaving. I'm going to San Francisco. I'm going to LA. I'm going to New York, whatever. And we opened up an office in New York. But the reason why we opened up the office in New York was so that we could send resources back to New Orleans. Right. And so now my New York team can essentially school my New Orleans team on stuff that they never experienced because they don't have the depth of tech. They don't have the depth of the tech ecosystem there the way they do in New York. And so it's all about like, how do you bring resources to where you're from, to your community, to your people?
Amen. And something we'll talk about offline is, the goal of really Disruption Now, we're starting a platform to do that and really connect just Black and brown entrepreneurs, just that, and help not only raise money, but help connect us. Because there's a good amount of us, but there's not enough to where we can at least make sure that we are connecting, know about each other, and grow and build, and because that's how we're going to take it to the next level. And we can do that in person, but we can also do that digitally as well. But I want to tell you about my quick story about raising money, and it hasn't been with as a founder yet, but that's my next venture. But I ran for office, and I ran for treasurer of the state of Ohio. Actually got over 2 million votes. Lost the race, right? But it was a humbling experience running for office. I assumed that all the contacts and I had would make it easy to run to raise them. It was not easy. I raised about $2.5 million, but it was taxing. It's a hard experience. It's a 90% no's.
That's an accomplishment. Like, too many people check the box. Like, what you've done, that's like historical
for a treasurer race. Like people running for governor, stuff like that. So, but what I learned is, have you ever seen The Wolf of Wall Street?
I have.
Yeah. Okay. I haven't seen it, but there's this one line that just keeps coming back to me. He just says, he said, look, your girlfriend doesn't like you. Good. Pick up the phone and start dialing. You can't pay the bill. Good. Pick up the phone and start dialing. Like, I want you to handle your problems by getting rich. And what he was saying was right. Like, it's the sure persistence. It is hard though, right? I mean, I can't tell you the amount of times I would go and go. I remember there was one contact I was trying to get to give some money. I must have called this contact 50 times. He would never return my call. He said, you got to keep calling. I'm like, God, you never returned my call, but one day he gave $12,000. So right. So it's one of those things that, you sometimes don't see it as over months and months, but you just got to you got to have a good product too. I had a good, but beyond that, you got to keep moving forward. So
that's true though. Cause it's kind of like, you got to just be persistent because you think that person's not seeing it, but they are. And they're like, man, this person.
That's what I'm saying. Which has made this easy.
He deserved this check. Like he has worked for this, every dollar of this check. And I think about that when I invest or like donate. I think about that like, dang, like this person deserves every dollar of his effort.
And so now that I'm putting this forward, it's made it easier because people know my work ethic, right? And they also know like, okay, I have to either tell him no or invest because like he's going to I'm not going to stop working. So people know that, and it's helped. But it was the process part of it though. It's only the procedure like this. The process is like 98%, and that's the part that people don't understand. It's just, and it's grueling. It was very lonely. It was very challenging. Sitting in front of a desk and just calling people for 4 hours in a row sounds like it's easy, but it is not. So it is, but it taught me because nothing's been harder than that. But let's go back to when you I think Solid Ground Innovations was your first company. Is that correct, Sevetri?
Mm-hmm.
Take me back to that point and tell me what you would tell your younger self now. What advice would you give your younger self? And then the second part of this question, what advice would you ignore from others or maybe even from yourself?
So shoot, this may be like a double answer for both.
That's all right.
a good friend of mine, he's now on like Inc. 500 companies. He's also in New Orleans, one of the top like events, PR, communications company here. And we both have built our strategic communications agencies to like multi-million-dollar companies. And we sit around and we call ourselves like, oh, this is my accountability partner. And, same
Right.
here. And one thing that we said that if we could do it again, we would have went in and worked for another agency first.
Interesting. That's something I don't think most people tell me why.
Yeah, to like learn what we didn't know. Like it was so much we didn't know because he ended up starting his agency because he was bringing in all these sales for another company, not an agency, but another company, right? I believe like pharmaceuticals, and he didn't get a promotion that he got passed up for. He got passed up for a promotion, and he was like, "What? Right. Like I've brought in more sales than anybody here. I'm leaving." And he quit and started his business like within a matter of weeks. For me, I was coming out of LSU. I had built a rapport like in the community, and so I started doing like strategic communications for nonprofits first. Then I started getting into politics, so I know the hustle too.
Oh yeah, you know that.
I
Yep.
ran communications for the first Black female mayor of Baton Rouge, Louisiana.
Okay.
And so I was doing that work, but we just talked about all the missteps that we made just because we didn't know what we didn't know, right?
Right.
How to properly price, how to properly bill, et cetera.
That is an art. I'm learning. I'm learning. I have an agency too that does content marketing. I advise politics, so we're very similar there. I looked at your record, so we have a lot in common here. So it's tricky learning how to price right. Unless there's like formulas and processes to do that. You're right.
It's so many processes about even like starting a business and ensuring that you have your tax liabilities set up, and particularly when you start hiring people. Because one thing that we did was that we live now more in this connected world where you can find these contractors and consultants that can help you drive your business. Then we were hiring people like W-2 employees, as soon as we had the opportunity.
Oh yeah.
And building like that. And so we just didn't know what we didn't know. And fortunately, our companies, we were able to get through it, right?
Right.
And we were able to like still build our companies and do X, Y, and Z. But, we had a lot of trials and tribulations along the way.
So it sounds like some advice you would ignore is to not start a business right away.
And so technically I could say, well, maybe I should ignore that my advice and say, no, girl, you just go out there and you just fake it till you make it, but you got to make it though, right?
Yeah, you got to make it. Yeah, I can't tell. Like I've looked, because I started my whole career has been in public service before this. For the most part, it wasn't really a career. I mean, I was a lawyer and did other stuff, but I was always aiming towards being in public office, and I ran for statewide office in Ohio. And that's why I did prepare for that moment really for the last 20 years. And then it obviously didn't turn out the way I thought it would. But all of that experience did prepare me to do this. So it's not like I went right out and started a business. But, I look at it, and then you're kind of helping me feel better about it. I was like, well, maybe I should have started a business earlier because this is something I can clearly do. But, maybe I wouldn't be the person I was unless I went through that experience. So, thank you for that. You've given me some motivation today.
Yes.
So you had so originally when you did the business, when you were looking at helping nonprofits, you came to a point where you realized that this can be a software as a service. I can use technology to really take this product and scale it to the next level. But you're not a tech person, right? So walk through the process, because I think people go into business and say, well, if I'm not a tech person, I can't do that. But I tell everybody, if they're in business, you are two things no matter what you are. If you're an accountant, you are a tech company and you're a media company. No matter what you are, if you're a nonprofit, you're still a tech and you're a media, because you have to know these things and do these things. But take us through the fact that some people, when they think about tech, they just get into they go against the wall and figure, I can't do tech. I'm not a tech person. I just don't know that. Talk to those people from a person. For you're not a tech person, so on and so forth, but you have a tech company and you've raised now, I don't know how much you've raised now. Is it $8 or $9, $10 million, however much you raised? You went from being quote unquote not a tech person to running a tech company. Take people through that process and let them overcome that barrier in their mind. That makes sense.
Yeah, I think there's two ways to look at it as well. So the first that I always tell people, if you're out there and you're working, you're looking for a marketing job or a sales job, sometimes people will not look at tech companies because they think they have to be technical too to join a tech company. But there's so many roles with inside of tech companies where you can fit, right? That you don't have to have technical backgrounds to work in a tech company. Secondly, starting a tech company, I think back to something that my friend Sherelle Dorsey said.
Jarrell's
When
coming on the show in
she
a few weeks. It's
Oh
all a
yeah.
small
So
world. This is a real
small
small
world, we're so
ecosystem.
connected. Sherelle had wrote about our raise, our Series A raise, and in the article, she called me like the antithesis to for a tech founder, right? So I'm Black, I'm woman, I'm from the South, I'm non-technical, and I'm a solo founder. So I'm like everything that they say you should not be if you start
Right.
a tech company. And so for me, my first company, Solid Ground Innovations, we were a communications and management agency, but we had an arm called SGI Cares that essentially sold to nonprofit organizations. We were essentially providing technical assistance or support to their back office, right, in lieu of full-time employees.
Right.
And then we were helping large enterprise customers like grant makers, like your Kellogg Foundations, your Ford Foundations, your End of Better Health, your community coffees, devise not only how they gave their money, but who they gave it to, and then also helping them manage the success of those initiatives and programs, right? So those awards. And as we began to grow as a company, we realized that we could no longer help the smallest nonprofits as a agency because we just didn't have enough time to do everything that we needed to do with organizations, and definitely not based on their budgets, right?
Right.
We would go under, right? We would have went under so much faster
Right.
than any company could imagine if you're working with different sectors. And so we started to think about how we could essentially productize the service and deliver it through a software solution. And so in November 2016, I was talking to my marketing director and he was like, hey, I was telling him about the idea. And he was like, hey, I went to Stanford. I got a buddy. He's a software engineer. He could probably help you think through this idea that you have for a
Right.
tech company. And then we were even calling a tech company a product. So I went out to the Bay. I sat down. I met with Ishmael, who would stay on board for a very long time and is still an advisor to the company. And he created a 30-page specifications deck with wireframes for essentially what will become ExemptMeNow first, and then we rebrand to Resilia. And so I came back to Louisiana, sat on it for a while, then began to look for an engineering team. Now, one hiccup that I faced that many others can't avoid is that because I wasn't technical, when I went out to hire an engineering team, it was hard to manage them, right?
Oh, I
Because
can imagine that.
they have one up on you because you can't see if they are doing their sprints when they're supposed to
Yep.
or delivering, and they giving you excuses for missing deadlines, and you're like, well, shoot, is this legitimate or not? Because you're not technical. One thing that helped me greatly was going back to Ishmael and hiring him as a technical consultant to
Mm.
oversee my engineers. And
Oh,
so
that's good.
because he was he was on my side, right? And so
Right.
he ensured that they were accountable, that they stayed on track. He reported back to me and he helped me a lot to bring up my lingo, right? And understanding of the tech side of tech, right?
Right.
But for me, I was like, okay, I'm about to take this service, I'm about to productize it and deliver it through a software solution because we are seeing every sector that we could imagine getting disrupted by technology. So either I'm gonna
Sure.
be a disruptor or I'm gonna be disrupted by it. So let me pick which one I want to do. And I wanted to be a disruptor. And the rest is history. But for me, it definitely was this thinking around, okay, how can I utilize technology to solve the problems that I was seeing in our industry that were very antiquated? What we were using was antiquated and dated. And how could I democratize the nonprofit philanthropy space in the process? And so, what I feel like for SaaS, I think that's going to be very common. So, for anyone that's like, oh, well, I'm
Agreed.
not technical, how can I start a tech company? you're going to see more and more, and you are people who are industry experts in their space who don't have a technical background but understand the problems that exist in their sector.
Yeah, Jewel Burke Solomon, who I'm sure you know, with Google Startups, was on the show, and she had a really great line about looking at as an entrepreneur solving a problem. She said, fall in love with the problem, not the solution, and
Yes.
really understanding. So looking at it from the technical background to further expound on what you said, it's really, you don't need to know C++ or whatever code you want to say, or some code or HTML or whatever, or you don't need to know artificial intelligence. What's more important, what is the real issue, is what problem are you trying to solve? What's the journey for your ideal person, customer? What are the barriers that they're having? What are the issues? Really falling in love with figuring out all the problems and the journey that target ideal customer is. Once you know that, the right solution will come about. That's not me. That's from Jill Burke Solomon. So
Yeah, if you're good at building teams, right? If you're good at like putting together people, and that's what I felt that I was really good at executing an idea.
yes. So, you were able to get this and have some money through actually already having a business. So, uh, talk about the process. Do you think it's still more important before you raise money to have some money first, or how would you go about advising overall the best approach to raising money? Because you've obviously been successful.
So having money first, do you mean putting your own money into your company first? And
Yes,
then so my friend Harold and I, Harold who's he's a
your
tech
accountability partner.
well, I think that we're just like founders in the struggle, right? I think that
Yeah.
everybody's like founders in the struggle. And we were having this conversation on Clubhouse and via a separate chat in which he was saying, no, don't use your own money. Don't use your own money. And I'm like, Harold, so you invested in startups where the founders don't have any skin in the game, like none. He was like, all right, when you say it like that. But I think because founders that don't look like us, white
Yeah,
founders, go out and
they don't have to
they
do
don't
it.
put any of their
Yeah.
money into their companies, right? And they go out and essentially raise money off ideas. I don't think we have that luxury. And even with this newfound wave of optimism around Black founders,
We'll
they
see. I'm
still
skeptical, but go ahead.
they're still not going to be giving us money off of no idea. So
No.
you kind of don't have a choice but to put something into your startup to get it off the ground, particularly if you're not technical, right? Because who's going to actually build it if it's software? And so I'm still a believer that, yeah, you should be like your first investment into your company. Now, looking back, would I have invested as much as I've invested? Maybe, maybe not.
Right.
And it's a Harris point, like he was dipping into like his 401k, he was pulling money out here, he sold the house, he used the
That's a
earnings from the
lot.
house and put it into the tech company. And
Yeah,
so
that's
like
exactly what Rodney Williams did too. I'm not sure if I'd do that either. Like, yeah, just go.
yeah, and so this is what we were doing, right? And so
Right.
if looking back, would I have done that again? Maybe, because I'm here now and I've been able to like recoup it. But if I had failed, I would have been hurt. I would have been so hurt.
I mean, it's easy to say because it went well, but
It's
so it's
easier to
hard to
say
say.
because it went well.
It's like, yeah, you took the shot and you made it, but if you're like LeBron James, you pass it, Danny Green missed, and you don't make it to you don't win the finals, then everybody's saying that wasn't the right shot. Who knows?
Yeah, I think that there's something to say about being persistent and continuously on in the realm of means, right? And so I think that we have become more creative, right? Don going crowdfunding, like going that
Yep.
route. And so there are just way more options today than there was when I was
Oh
started off.
yeah,
I'll
yeah,
say
that's
that.
definitely true. Yeah, you made it's amazing that you came to this point because there were a whole lot less options then. That's certainly the case.
And then was only like 5 years ago. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah, 5 years is a hell a year ago. Look at 2019 to 2020. I mean, it's been
Yeah,
a
this is true.
it moves at an exponential rate. Um, so when you see founders, because you're also an investor, right?
I am. I would consider
What?
myself a angel operator.
Okay, so from what you've seen and from your experience from raising money, what do founders do wrong most often when they go about raising money?
They think they know it all and they don't, right?
Right.
And I say that because I was listening into a founder just talk about how they wanted to raise capital and how they didn't want for investors to like draw them along, how they were sending them these updates, etc. But I told that person, I was like, well, include me on your updates, I'll give you some feedback. And they sent me their update, and I'm like, no investor is going to take this update seriously just because it wasn't in like traditional format. It was very like vague. He was trying to have like conversation updates, and that's not how you send out updates. It's like, here's what we're doing, here's some bullet points, here's some metrics, here's some updates or ways you can help. Like, you keep it simple, short, and it's things like that, because he had no idea that his update could be like literally shooting him in the foot, right?
Right.
And so I think it's a lot about not knowing, thinking that we're actually like killing it, but maybe not so much, right? Maybe
Right.
maybe we need to send this around to a couple other founders who have some insights around. They don't even have to raise a lot of money. Maybe they won one pitch competition. Maybe they know how to put together a deck. You can Google some of this stuff as well, or follow like First Round or Y Combinator, and they have a lot of these
Yep.
resources on their website. And so I do feel that sometimes some of the biggest mistakes that we make are in just ensuring that we run like a tight ship when we're
Yes.
fundraising. And then also having together like your deal room. Like, people die because of their deal room on the Grapevine when trying to raise capital, because the investor
What do
will
you mean by
say,
deal room?
so your deal room is basically where your due diligence is. So when people ask about where your financials are, can you send over your financials? Can you send over your go-to-market strategy? Can you send over your team bios? Can you send over this, and that, right? All of that information, all of those files go inside of your deal room.
Okay.
And that's the due diligence that is going to be done on your company to see if it's viable for investment. And so sometimes, like, I'll be looking at something, and if I'm like, oh, I'm interested, I heard that you do some investing. Here's my deck, right? And so they're like, oh, I got this deck. And I was like, oh, well, can you share X, Y, and Z with me? And then I don't
Right.
hear from them ever again.
Right.
Because they didn't think about, oh, crap, well, people might ask for other stuff. And
Right.
so you definitely have to have a tight deal room. And I do feel that if you have a tight deal room, it's going to get you at least further in the investment process.
Got it.
But sometimes investors, that's how they weed you out. They'll ask for something, and they're like, okay, let's see if they.
That makes sense. I mean, yeah, that makes sense. Okay, that's good advice. So, what do you think is the most important in building a team or bringing on a co-founder? You don't have a co-founder, but you do build a team. So, what do you look for? What's most important? Alignment with the mission, character, or some skill set that is missing?
Yeah, so we always look heavy for culture fit.
Okay,
Like, would
culture
this
fit.
person get along with others on our team? Do they embody like the mission of what we're building? Are they excited about what we're building? And then from there, we actually look at everything else, right? And so
So, how do you evaluate the culture fit? To help walk me through that seems like a process that has a lot of intangibles, but maybe you have a process to how you figure out culture fit. How do you go about that?
I mean, it could be something as simple as like, oh, we believe that Black Lives Matter.
Right.
You probably not a culture fit. I'm not, you're probably
Right.
not a culture fit if you don't believe that for us. But it's also like, you believe that technology should be accessible for everyone, right? Irregardless of like handicaps, irregardless of other key things that may be prohibiting someone to access, say, our website or something like that nature, right? You believe that we can essentially democratize our space in a way that brings more transparency and oversight and equitable practices for organizations led by Brown and Black people, by LGBTQ community. So whatever that may be, right? And so these are things that we're looking for in the makeup of people who are coming into our company, just because if you are staunch, like pro-Trump, running around with a flag outside, you're probably not going to fit
Probably
well.
not fit. You're not a fit with us either, so don't feel bad.
Yeah. And so I remember one of my team members and she's African American, and she had worked in other tech companies before. And the week after George Floyd was murdered, I gave a talk right on our all hands about me growing up in the South, right, and dealing with racism, etc. And she said that she just like clutched, like she was just like cringing because she was just like, how are people going to take this, right? Like, is there going to be like backlash? I'm like, girl, first of all, take what? Say what? Like, it's like, if you have a problem with what I said, this is probably not the place.
Turn down for what? There you go. I like it. There you go.
Yeah. And I was like, this is why more Black founders need to be in position to build companies, because the fact that she like was scared, right? She didn't know how people were going to receive it, because you're so used to like a white man getting in and saying like whatever the PR person scripted him to say. Or
which
whatever.
They would have told you to, you shouldn't say this, it's gonna.
Yeah, like we're not dealing with that. Like Coin Base said, there's like, we're not talking about this in our company, right? And so they're building that culture that, oh, we don't talk about politics, we don't talk about social issues with inside of our company, right? That's a culture that they're now building around that. Although he also 2 months after George Floyd made a whole post.
See, I don't even think that's real. Like, and this is what makes me, what irritates me on that, because I think I've talked to some of my white colleagues about this, that you associate politics with my humanity. This is an issue. Like, Black Lives Matter is not political to me.
No,
it's about, do you believe, like, we're not talking about cutting taxes. That's not the discussion here. So, right. And so if we were like, okay, like, I get that. Like, I don't think if somebody has the view that we should give more in taxes or less in taxes, that right. But if someone has a view on understanding equality, humanity, and they don't understand that, if we're not having that discussion, then by default we're going to have an environment that's going to be less inclusive. And you're saying that's okay. And see, that's the problem I get into this. Not when they tie everything that's dealing with our issues, when we're talking about just not being killed by police, that's not political.
No, like equal pay. Like how does equal pay political? Like me wanting to have equivalent pay to my counterpart who does the same job. What? How is this even political? How did we make COVID-19 political? Like,
like wearing a mask, like data is suddenly political. So
it's crazy. It's crazy.
It is crazy, but it is where we are, because this is why disruption is about two things, and the platform is about two things, but we're about disrupting common narratives and constructs, because the narratives reinforce the constructs. What you just said, when people talk about politics and they equate us talking about equity and equality, those are not political. That's about our existence. And that's why I push back hard when people, I had one show called White Christians and Privilege with a pastor, to get him to understand, like, listen, like, this is, I don't care what your politics is. If you're a Republican, libertarian, none of you should be okay with a president that can't denounce white supremacy. Like, this is, I don't understand what you don't understand. Like, this is not and so,
heck, even in Louisiana, they didn't vote for David Duke because they were like, all right.
That's what I'm saying. He might get elected now.
Shoot, maybe. But they voted for him at the state level, but they were like, okay, we can't send this man to Congress. We can't. They were like, so we're going to vote for the crook because we're not going to vote for the racist.
Yeah. I take a crook over racist any day.
Me too. I was
so like, I'm just saying.
Hey, but the thing is, people understand, right? They let you know that people, they understand.
Exactly.
That there are differences here.
Exactly. So let's talk a little bit about leadership development and self-awareness. So one of my statements is that, part of being self-aware is having people around you, those accountability partners that wound you with the truth sometimes, the truth that you may not want to hear. Can you think of the last time that happened and what that truth might have been?
The last time that has happened. So I would probably say, shoot, my investors always trying to send me like double rounds of truth, right? But yeah, so I'll use that as an example. And that was primarily around like how we were hiring. Like, they want us to hire from the top down, but they were like, oh, you should hire a VP instead of this operations role that was much higher, so like a head. And I was like, okay, but we find someone that then they meet the bill, etc. But that was like one of those hard facts where this particular investor, just like his mechanics around hiring, I was like, okay, I get it. I get it now. So this is
Right.
like, that definitely was like a hard truth around just kind of sitting back and like running the full process, and then taking in consideration of like what he was thinking around who we should hire and what that person should look like and what it shouldn't look like. And so I feel like I always face like hard truths with my investors related to like business or what I'm looking at in general. I'm trying to think of like a personal like hard truth.
I'm trying to say, let's time somebody wound you with the truth. I'll ask a different version of kind of this question. What's an important truth you have that a lot of people disagree with you on?
So I actually believe that people should have the right to express how they feel.
Okay.
Um, I think about this and I'm not sure if you're on Clubhouse.
I'm not yet. You can give me there. I haven't been there
Oh,
yet. I've heard about
I'll
it.
invite you on.
Oh,
You will
thank
like
you.
it, particularly because of what you're doing here. So I'll hustle some invites because it's still a hustle game. So one controversial conversation on Clubhouse, which is an audio platform, social media platform, was that essentially they should ban people, right? So they should ban people from talking about specific things, right? And so that could be like Jews and blacks, and then it escalates into things that become anti-Semitic. And I agree with that. Like, yeah, if you're going down that hole, you probably need to get shut down before you go down that hole.
Right.
But I don't believe in like muting people unless it's like going to do some physical damage. Because I want to know who across the street from me.
That's exactly how I feel.
Like, what tell me more. Tell me more of how you really feel, right?
Yep.
And so I feel that we are in a time where it's like, oh, well, that person was, I think it becomes dangerous when it's like, oh, well, that person was accused of X, Y, and Z. They can't get on this platform. I'm like, how do you not allow them to get on a public platform? Couldn't they not use Google? I mean, it's not
They got to be careful.
logical to me.
Yeah.
And that was like Russell Simmons came onto the platform. Oh my God. It was like,
Oh, they're probably like, oh yeah, I can, I can see how that could cause controversy.
yes. And so I got it and I got it. Like I completely understood like the whole sentiment behind it. But I'm like, man, this is interesting because it creates it's a conversation, right? Of like what is allowable and what's not. And it's such a hard thing to actually align to walk, because it's like, yeah, definitely like that's triggering. But that's like triggering for a lot of people.
Yeah.
But then someone else might do something like, dang, they may have actually not knew that that was triggering. But they learned today, right? And so you can learn today. And so it might be a very good learning opportunity for someone. Sure. But we're just such in like call out culture where people want to like ruin you, that people can't learn publicly. You can't learn those type of lessons, right, in the public. Even if it wasn't intentional that you were trying to learn that lesson in the public eyes. And so, yeah, I think that that's probably something that most people don't necessarily.
I actually agree with you too. I've had someone similar. I want to say Will Hayes said something similar like this, and people are naturally, or like people think it's actually natural to be irrational. How else can you explain, I don't know, all of human history, Trump as president, I don't know, here and there. I mean, there is people, I think I had Robert Greene on the show, and he had his latest book was The Laws of Human Nature. And the second rule talks about irrationality. He said the first rule of to be rational was to first understand that you are irrational. So I think trying to just take people out because they have these beliefs. I mean, I think it's also more important. There's some people that are they're just going out here trying to cause trouble, whatever. Then I think get rid of those people. But if some people have these beliefs because of something that's triggering in their background, we have to understand this, because it's not like we still got to live with these people. They're still next door, right? They're still there. And so figuring that out, I know some people that are Trump supporters, and I say very plainly, Trump is racist. And they say, and the guy got offended with me for all these reasons, say, well, I feel like you're calling me racist. I said, this is what I said. I said, Trump is racist. And I said, I got all these reasons and I have all these facts.
Yes.
You can choose to accept them or not, but this is what it is. And so that not a deal breaker for you. It's not, but don't get offended if I tell you what I believe is a fact based upon what I've seen and what I've heard.
Absolutely.
Right. And so I have these conversations, and I'm not afraid. And I think people on the progressive side and the left, like I will have a conversation with a racist for this reason. Like I want to embarrass him or her for their beliefs, and I'll have that public exchange to show you why everything they believe is without any type of substance, and it's something you shouldn't believe. And I can do that without canceling their voice. I'll cancel their voice through my persuasion and argument. That's how I think we got to be.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that's not, particularly if you're on Clubhouse, it's like if there was a Trump room, oh man, they would try to get it shut down.
But there should be a Trump room. If there is one, I want to hear it.
The president of the United States, like, what do you mean that, oh, this is a white supremacist room? Yeah, probably, but he's still the president of the United States.
And millions of people voted for him, and even when prayerfully he's going to lose, 40 to 45% of the country is voting for him. That's a fact.
Right, and you can't mute those people. So no, that's like, that's probably something I believe that I held, that yeah, you should meet those people. And
I'm in Ohio. I think this, Sevetra, I think this is because where you're from. You're in Louisiana. Like I'm in Cincinnati. If I muted every person like that, like I probably couldn't do business. Like just a lot of people like that. We have to learn how to deal and communicate. And I say shut down their points in a way without muting them. Just mute them through beating them in the argument. Like that's what we got to do.
Exactly. I was like, that's why, Trump won, is because of that, right? That mentality around just like, oh, they don't exist, muting them, not acknowledge. I'm like, okay, that's how Trump won the first time.
Yeah, we're not gonna pretend here. We're not gonna live in a bubble.
I can tell you in the South, we were like,
Well, yeah, I'm in Cincinnati, which by the way is as far as you can go in the North and still be in the South. Like I wasn't one of those people that was like surprised. And if you don't pay attention and you stay in your own bubble, we can also do the same thing. We can just keep reinforcing things that we believe to be true. Like these people are the outliers. They're not. We got to figure out how to engage them. As we get ready to wrap up, a couple more questions. You have a committee of 3, living or dead, to advise you on business or life. Who are these 3 people and why?
My mother, Melody Hobson, and
she'd be a good one.
Maybe like Bill Gates, because he's like the king of philanthropy.
Okay. Final question. You have a billboard or Google ad that summarizes or states your beliefs. What is that statement? And why?
Get out of your own way.
Get out of your own way.
Yeah. Hopefully self-explanatory.
Yeah, that is. I do have one final question to you said when you first started that when you started the business, you felt like you can make change and be in charge of doing it all at the same time. You still feel that way?
I do. I'm still hopeful.
Sevetri Wilson, it's a pleasure having you on. Thanks so much.
Thank you.